all that is good, all that is holy, and all that is sacred, and in the warm and loving energy of this ministry, Spiritual Life Center. And we especially want to welcome you if you are here for the very first time, because we know that you are not here by accident. We are all here by divine appointment, and we're really happy to see all you with us tonight. And Reverend Day, would you please lead us in our opening prayer?
Sure will. So let us all breathe into the space, bring our attention into the room, into this wonderful, warm, loving group. And let us open our hearts, addressing the divine in the way that we know how, in that special way that's different for each and every one of us. And let us join in asking that the presence of Spirit surround us tonight as we listen to the wisdom of Reverend Trapp, knowing that there's a message that's just for each and every one of us. And let us spend another second coming together as a group, knowing that the power of love multiplies as we bring our attention together. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Dave. So our guest is Reverend James Trapp, as our senior minister. Some of you have probably seen him before. How many were here were the first night of his adventure? Okay, so the rest of the story, and we're not sure what that's going to be.
We didn't know what the last one was going to be.
Right, yeah. So when we left off, we kind of, and I'm using the term kind of very seriously, it was things had fallen apart. You were picking yourself up and going off to ministerial school. But I think the question that I have is how did spirituality start to inflict itself upon you, so to speak? As you were going through these trials and tribulations, did it sort of leak and filter in, or did you already have enough of something behind you to start, pushing you forward? What was that process? I think that's the spiritual path that led you out of that dark time into...
It's almost like I feel like, sometimes you watch a series on TV and it said last week, to give you a summary of what happened, bring you up to this week. So a couple people that weren't here last time, I went through, my life experience. You have those pivotal moments in your life that have an impact on kind of in shaping the direction and how you see the world. And I shared a little bit on Mother's Day how I was abandoned by my mother when I was very young. And so that shaped a lot of my perceptions. And, of course, that led to probably overcompensating, to fill a void within me that didn't fulfill me, because nothing outside of you can fulfill you. And after a while, what becomes satisfying becomes dissatisfying. And so my life collapsed after that, and I had to rebuild my life again. So the question is, what is the question again?
See, this is where it gets fuzzy because, nothing is linear, because your life can be falling apart and you can still be having a spiritual life, and then you can fall apart again. Yeah. And I guess the question really is did you have a spiritual foundation going into this difficult time, or was it the difficult time that brought you into a different kind of spirituality?
I kind of think my experiences kind of pushed me into a spiritual path. I don't know if I didn't really have much of one before that. I think I did have an interest in things that were beyond my human understanding in the back of my mind, but I didn't know how that would apply to changing my life or making my life different. Because I think I may have shared that when I was in college, I majored in economics, I was very interested in philosophy and religion. So I wouldn't take any of those courses for grades, but I would just take them because if you passed, you got credit. And if you didn't pass, it wouldn't show up on your transcript. So I could decide, whether to take them or not. So I think I had an interest in that. And there were several events that opened my eyes to see the world differently. And, the first one was, the forgiveness process that I went through that really lifted the guilt that I had, and it opened up, the possibility that I could actually have a future. There was a second one, which I really had a oneness experience that I think I shared was kind of right out the book of William James, who wrote a book, The Variety of Religious Experiences. He wrote it in the early 1900s. He was a psychologist from Harvard, and he was one of the ones that may have even come up with the phrase thoughts or things. Well, the first time I ever read it, it was in that text. And he talks about the idea of having a oneness experience. But I didn't know what it really meant because I didn't have any context in which to evaluate it until I was in a drug rehab center and I had a roommate who used to go to a spiritual center, a unity center. And he would go regularly because they felt that it was very helpful for our process of overcoming our addictions. And when he was going, he said, you should come. And I asked him what it was about, and he said, is that a church? He said, kind of, sort of. And and I said, well, I don't do church. And he bugged me quite a bit. And I said, well, if you don't bother me anymore about this, I'll go this one time. And needless to say, I went that one time, and like I've shared before, many others may have had this experience who had an allergy to religion or allergy to church. I sat in the back near the door and figuring that if someone said something I didn't like, then I would, I can leave. And the message that day was specifically crafted for me. And I shared many times that I knew it was so much crafted for me that someone I know must have given that minister my personal file. I was really clear that, someone had violated my privacy rights and somehow. So needless to say that after that experience, I went back regularly. So I think, kind of juxtaposing my experience and maybe on some level looking for answers or just being open. I think maybe because I was just open to it. They have that statement that when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears. I was ready. I was in a sense, you often use the word humble in spirituality, and I've always believed that word meant to be teachable. I was teachable at that moment, and all the other education I had was paled in comparison to what I learned. So that was kind of like the precipitating event when I walked in there that day, because then I got fully engrossed in the process. I was hungry, as Les Brown would say.
So as you move through this process, how long from the time you started in Unity until God really caught up with you and you finally said, yes, I'll go to ministerial school? You've talked about saying no, hell no, oh, hell no.
Yes.
Was that like within weeks, months, years?
Oh, that was a few years. Because I went on this pathway thinking I was going to get my life, that this was just personally for me to get what I thought my life was supposed to look like. And, I was still finding myself more interested in spiritual type. Switch? Or?
Just take that one.
Okay.
I'll get it.
Oh, okay. You got to back up and give her that one. Okay. So, Yeah, it was several years. So I was doing all this to kind of piece my life back together. But as they say, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. You can never really piece it back together like it was before. It is going to be different no matter what. And I had a really great teacher and mentor at the time. His name was Bill Cameron, and I would say that Bill was more like a mystic. I mean, a true mystic. I mean, a mystic would never tell you they're a mystic. That would be like totally violating any concept of someone being a mystic. But I saw that, a mystic is just kind of see things in a context that's much bigger than what we see in our three-dimensional kind of way of seeing things. So he was one of my great teachers. And I got this notion, like you said, of going to ministerial school, but I resisted it because I just never envisioned that image being something that I would do or even fit as my life. But this teacher, he actually said when I made the decision, and I let him know, he said he knew about it even before I made the decision, because he saw something in me that I did not see in myself. So, and I don't know if I shared the experience the last time that I was going through this resistance, and I was with a friend, and we'd taken some kids to a youth fair where they had roller coasters and so forth. And I was just kind of watching them, and I must have been in a state of surrender, because then I saw the picture or vision of me actually being a minister. Whatever that vision was for me at that time. And then immediately as I saw that, it's almost like an electrical current went through my entire body in that instant. And then in that moment, I made the decision that I would go forth and go through the process.
Did you enjoy ministerial school?
I actually did. I really enjoyed it. I think more than any other schooling, because I think it had a much greater meaning for me, more so than going to law school, going to Ivy League college. That was, just kind of things that you made a decision to do. But I enjoyed it. And it's interesting, when I was going through the ministerial program in Unity during that time, they would always kind of change the curriculum every few years. They had most recently, prior to its current iteration, probably before that, they were seeking to get accredited, so it made it more academic. But when I went through there for the 2 years that I was there, it was very experiential, so that everything that we learned, it was how you can apply that in your own life. You had to really embody the experience. And I thought it was a very powerful experience to go through. You had to take a lot of self-reflection, and you learn a lot, when you're in a class of 30 people, I think it was, and usually you would sit at the table maybe for the whole 2-year period with the same people over and over again. And I don't know if you know what it's like to be with the same person day in and day out, week in and week out. You learn what your buttons are, and that really made me have to always look at myself whenever something came up within me that I wanted to blame somebody else for causing me to experience a certain way. And that was one of the big things that I think I learned in ministerial school, is that personal responsibility for whatever comes up within you, 100%. And it prepares you for ministry.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but approximately which decade was this?
Well, I started ministerial school in 1994.
Okay.
And I was there for 2 years, 1992, and I finished in 1994, so it was 2 years.
So, and they've changed the curriculum. And a lot of things are online now too, aren't they?
Yeah, almost.
Yeah.
Everything is online, and then they may go back periodically, but we were on campus for the whole 2 years.
So the form of meditation that you got into, was this concurrent with ministerial school, or was this something that you pursued afterwards? I understand that you've spent a lot of time studying meditation.
Well, it's a foundational piece of what Unity is about. Unity has its own, quote, meditation practice, and they have a number of steps, that I always thought was, a little cumbersome. So I had a really great instructor that taught us Vipassana meditation. And I got introduced to Vipassana meditation maybe my first or second, maybe the end of my first year, early my second year in ministerial school. And so I've been using that form of meditation since 93, 94, because it's really simple, but it's not necessarily easy. No matter how far you do it, your mind always wanders, and you can never control your thoughts. You can just observe them. And the whole idea is to be aware of them and to bring back. So I found that to be a very powerful, simple to practice, not necessarily easy to practice meditation practice.
But it sounds like it's an exercise in non-attachment, of not, allowing the thoughts to go by and not making up stories about the thoughts and just letting them be.
Yeah, they just tell you, all the structure tell you, the thoughts are going to come up. You just observe them and say, oh, there's a thought, and come right back to your breathing. That's it. Nothing else. That's all the practice is. And I used to come regularly. It's interesting, when I was in Florida, and I used to take my vacation time, I used to fly all the way to California for a week retreat, 10-day retreat at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, actually not too far from, I think it's in Marin County. So I fly into San Francisco, and I drive up to Marin County, and since I've been here, I haven't been there once.
Well, we keep you a little busy here.
Yeah.
Besides which, a vacation now is going to the other...
Yeah, on the East Coast, yeah.
The other edge of the coast. Would you do any of it differently? Or do you think your life is...
Would I do my life differently? That's always a difficult question, because most people will tell, I never do anything in my life differently. I might have been more... I guess attentive maybe to the signs that were around me, to pay attention to to a more direct spiritual path, but it is what it is. You catch it when it's the right and perfect time. I probably would not have had the same experience if I made different choices. It's really hard to say, but I probably would say, this is I don't know if there's any, we have this big debate when in ministerial school, do you have free choice or free will and stuff like that. It's the ancient old spiritual question, whether or not you really do, or whether or not, there's some options that you have. And then you can take this road or that road, then you can have, maybe the road not taken, you can speculate about it. But then I started reading stuff from this channeler named Seth. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Seth. And Seth would be talking about the idea that you can fuse a life that you did not take with the life you currently have. So anyway, it's a little bit too deep to probably get into right now, but it's very fascinating to consider that. So to answer your question, I probably wouldn't do anything different. I mean, I could look back and say some choices I should have made or could have made better, that have made my life better. Maybe avoided the pains that I went through. But if I hadn't gone through those, then I may have not gone on the spiritual path. So maybe it wasn't even my choice. That's why I say, do we really have free choice? Maybe we have some choices, but our will is really destined by something greater than ourselves.
And then there are the people who believe that we all sign contracts before we get here, and and I have the picture of this huge conference table up there, and everybody's sitting around it writing their contracts. I amuse myself with that. And then you're free to break them when you get here. So, but I mean, I look at my life and I just think that it's why I'm here right now sitting in this chair is all the things that I have walked through is what got me to this place. So, So now you're here at SLC and you don't go to Spirit Rock anymore, but you teach meditation and you still maintain your meditation process.
That's probably the one consistent thing in my life is, the meditation. If I can't do it every morning for 20 minutes, even if it's just 5 minutes, and even during the daytime, if I just take 4 or 5 minutes, I find that it gets me back centered more quickly than if I didn't have that. We live in a very distracting world, and it seems like things are, I don't know whether it's me, but it seems like things are moving faster, speeding up more quickly than ever before. And I think this is where we need to stop and slow down even more so than in years past. At least in my life, it seems that way. Yeah.
I was reading, I can't remember who the author was. It was some Unity book written in the 1950s. And the author was going on about how fast life was and how could anybody possibly keep up with what was going on in like 1952. And I just wonder what they would, it's like what they would do with now. Because I agree, we are so hard pressed to find our centers anymore.
I do notice it because I see, how my son, adapts to the pace of life seemingly more readily than I did, or I am even right now to changes. And so, I think the ones who are coming along, their brains are wired differently, and I'm maybe trying to rewire mine, or maybe not rewire it. Maybe we should go against that. Just, don't get caught up into the way things are.
Somebody has to stay calm. So we have a little bit of time. I've asked Reverend James to take us through meditation tonight. So does anybody we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah,
if you have
I always like questions. That's where I can figure out what's on people's minds and what's important. You going to pass out the mic?
I'll pass out.
Okay.
I was wondering what inspires you as far as maybe a place, a type of music, a song, a movie. What inspires you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, there are a number of things that inspire me. I like observing anyone who is really outstanding in their craft. It doesn't really matter what field it is in. It may be something that I don't even have any knowledge of at all. It could be somebody who is a spectacular cook, and I can just watch them do their cooking, and that can inspire me. It's just something about they do it at such an excellent level. So I think, people who have really gotten outstanding in what they do. A couple of things that I enjoy personally, I can just walk on a beach for hours. I mean, it's just something about the sound of the ocean I can just listen to it and just walk in the sand, and I get inspired by that. And music, music can change my mood in a nanosecond. And like I said, I could listen to different. I think as I got older, I've broadened my interest in music, my taste in music have broadened. I probably grew up mostly listening to pop, but my dad was a jazz aficionado. And so, one of his favorite musicians was a saxophonist by the name of Charlie Parker. And he was a Charlie Parker groupie, so to speak. He said that no matter where Charlie Parker was, I think he probably lived in New York, New Jersey at the time, so he would follow him anywhere he would be. If he in Philadelphia, he'd be there. He'd be in Chicago, he'd follow him to Chicago. And so he had a lot of Charlie Parker musics and And so, my stepmom probably has all of his albums now, LPs as they call them. Some of them old. That might even be worth something, now that I think about it. So, in music, those things inspire me.
Speaking of inspiring, we all have heroes. Who are your heroes? Who do you really admire and why?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Well, in your family, sometimes some of your best heroes. I had an aunt she's gone on the other side of the veil, and one of the things I liked, not only she was really good, she was actually a jazz pianist. She was a pianist. She just was really good in music, and so I admired that. I think more than anything that she would know how to affirm everyone. I think everyone that went around her felt better being in her presence. It's just something that her way of being, how she spoke to you. And if you were feeling not good about yourself, after you spent some time with her, you felt that you could do anything. And so I think that she's an important person in my immediate family. And then, of course, as I grew up, you had your heroes that were from the outer, that you didn't know personally. But believe it or not, when around my age, you look at sports heroes. And, of course, one of my major heroes was Muhammad Ali. When I was, because I can still remember when I was 12 years old, I guess I'm dating myself a little bit, and he was, fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world. I had my 2-station transistor radio listening to him. But I think what he brought out was not only his boldness and braggadocious nature, but really I began to really recognize his character when he took a stand to not enter the Army and participate in the Vietnam War. And he gave up millions of dollars because of his principle. And I think because of that, I've always admired not only him for his skills, that's something that he was born with and he cultivated with work, but because of his beliefs that he held. So that's another person. And then probably, a third one would be Nelson Mandela, because he was a demonstration that no matter how low you sink, he was in prison for 27 years in South Africa because of his, opposition to apartheid. And he came out of that not holding any bitterness or resentment or anger toward those who imprisoned him, and eventually became the very president of the country that had him in prison for 27 years, which I thought that still blows my mind even today. So it's people like that, because it demonstrates the power of our spirit, that circumstances do not have the final word. And so when I need some inspiration and I think I have it bad, then I think about what he's gone through. And then I say, I ain't got no problems.
I'm just so inspired hearing your story and how you went from drugs and how you just totally transformed your whole entire life.
I'm still working on myself. So
Well,
an
yeah,
unfinished
yeah.
product here.
And we're never finished.
Yes.
But, I came to SLC about 4 years ago, and I didn't know how to meditate, and I wasn't going to church because I grew up Catholic, and I never understood it. And then I was going through a divorce, and I was introduced to come to SLC, and I've been in some of your courses. The first one was 7 Keys to the Kingdom.
Yeah.
And then I started going through cancer while I was going through a divorce. And I know it comes from the inside out, not the other way around. And I've always been such a negative person, and now I see the good in all things, even the good around having cancer. And if I wasn't going through a divorce, I would never known had it, and I wouldn't be here today. So I speak to people in my cancer support group, and I'm always telling them, don't focus on what's happening, what's wrong. We're all going to die someday. But to really focus on being in the present moment, because life only happens in the present moment. Worrying about the past or trying to figure out the future, you're never going to find it there. But when you're in the present moment and you're more positive and you think more positive, like my sister's going through cancer now, she's in so much pain. She stopped focusing on the pain and she started meditating again and seeing being more spiritual, and the pain was gone for a while. Because the more you focus on a problem, the more you're going to have the problem. That's what I see. And now I see my whole life is different. And even though I can't do a lot of things I used to do, I'm still going to the gym. I'm still doing aqua classes, jumping up and down. And I can see that when I make a difference for someone over there and it touches their heart and they tell me that, I'm like, I'm just blown away. And you're touching our hearts every Sunday when you're here. You speak to us and it comes right in here and it comes alive. And that's what life's about, moving forward and not focusing on all the horrible things in life and just moving forward, living in the moment, living each day and every way I'm getting better and better. And when I felt like, oh, is my cancer coming back? Oh my gosh, let it go, because we don't know. It's about the living. And that's what we're here for, is to really focus on the living and not the dying.
Well,
so thank you so much, and for being here, supporting us every Sunday.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you believe that man is basically good or basically evil?
Okay. Well, let's take a look at that, because then we have to find, what is good, what is evil. Then we get a whole philosophical discussion, about that, because now first thing that comes to mind is someone from Shakespeare said that it's neither good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I think how we see things, determines what they are for us. So, that's a whole different conversation. But if I have to say, well, there are things that are life-affirming and life-denying, I think that the nature of humanity is to be life-affirming. Now, we may have been taught to go another path. I think anything that is what we could, put in the category as evil or bad, however we define that, if we can agree upon what that is something that we've learned. I remember when I was in I don't know why I remember this, because we had to write a paper, and I don't remember exactly what it was about, but maybe it was about the inherent nature of human beings. And I seem to recall I was writing about if somebody was sitting next to a child, a stranger, and that child maybe just got up and maybe put him or herself in danger, then even though that child was a stranger to that person, that the natural inclination would be to save that child, to do something for that child. And I would bet that every individual, and this is just my thesis, who were in that position would save the child. And to me, I think that was my illustration that our inherent nature is one of being good. And somehow we may have forgotten that as time went on, because of events, because of conditioning, because of beliefs. So anyway, if I didn't believe that, then I would really be depressed as I looked at what was happening in the outer world on a regular basis. So that gives me hope that that's our inherent nature. And I think that's what we're trying to do in any kind of spiritual path, is to bring us back into alignment with our true nature, which is, I think, inherently good. But that's a very interesting question that we can go philosophically on for a long time.
So I have a question. Is that we teach one thing. And no matter how we phrase it, we only teach one thing, right?
Well, I think we're agreeing to that. I believe that there's one thing. Yes.
So how do you consistently come up with a different way to present it every Sunday, 25 minutes every Sunday practically?
Well, I don't know if I really do that. I think there's some central ideas. Well, let me say, I think, what I discovered over time is that most teachers, ministers, they have maybe a central belief or a dominant belief or a primary belief that often comes from their experience. And I think I shared the last time I was here that for me, probably from a spiritual perspective, my dominant idea is the realization of our oneness with everything and with the presence of God, each other, because of my oneness experience. So everything that I look at, I don't know, most of the time, if I think about it, maybe I'm not even doing it consciously, is to how do we come back to the realization of our oneness with the one. Whether it's our own healing, it's about realization of our oneness with the wholeness of spirit. Whether it's even if it's a relationship, you're really realizing your oneness with that which is in common with you, with the person around you. Whether you're looking for, greater peace of mind, prosperity, it's always going back to the realization of your oneness with that which provides you everything. So there's a golden thread that most really good ministers, and I'm saying that I'm not good, I won't judge myself on that, but I think the ones I observe have a central idea that they lean on, that they go back to, that you can always relate to whatever they're saying to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have about 10, 15 minutes. Would you like to take us through a silent meditation?
Yeah, well, I can do that. I know there's a few people that took
How many people
the
took
mindfulness meditation. There's a few, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 or 6 people. So they know what the drill is. For me, I'll just kind of do a preliminary. Like I said, this is, the mindfulness meditation is the one that I probably know the best because I practice the most. I've tried others just to be aware of them. The whole idea is to be totally in the moment and be totally present. And, we seek to ground ourselves in something. Sometimes some meditations say focus on a, flame in a candle or focus on saying a mantra to kind of bring your attention to the here and now. And then in the mindfulness, we talk about focusing on our breath. And what we do in that teaching is just observe the breath. Sometimes just coming in what's going in and out your nostrils, or if your abdomen is going in and out as you breathe in and breathe out, and give your total attention to that. And when your mind wanders and it goes somewhere else, a thought comes up, as it always does. You think, oh my God, I forgot 3 items on my to-do list today I didn't get to. What a nut, what a terrible person I am. Or I wonder, did I lock the door before I left home? All kinds of thoughts come up, and you just observe that and just come back to the breath. So if you want to join in me with that, I always tell people if we're sitting is that, you have your feet flat on the floor and it's nothing fancy. You sit up alert, and so maybe if you can move your back slightly away from the back of the chair to be totally present, and just start observing your breath as it goes in and out. each in-breath and out-breath, you're just focusing on your breath. We'll take a few minutes and focus on the breath. And as thoughts come up, as they inevitably do, you don't do anything about it but watch it. Let it float on by. Don't try to fight it or resist it. Just be aware of it and bring yourself back to your breath. Take a few moments to do that, focused on your breathing. As thoughts come up, observe them and come back to your breath. If any thoughts come up, come back to your breathing. Just feeling the sensations in your body, an itch. Observe it. And go back to observing your breath. Keep your attention on your breath. That if we do that a few times a day, it makes a big difference in your day. When everybody's losing their heads, you can keep yours. You know, it really makes a difference. And it reduces a lot of stress. I think I found out that, you know, many illnesses have their origins in stress. And all the sciences indicate if you can reduce the stress, you reduce, you know, the likelihood of illnesses. And what I realized that, you know, stress for me was, as I use an analogy, like if you have a computer and you have too many applications open, you know, and after a while you have so many open that your computer slows down, and then eventually, you know, it can crash. And I think in our human mind, if we start taking in too much stuff, at least for me, when I feel stressed, it means I'm trying to address too many applications at one time. And the meditation brings me back to the present moment. And then when I go back, I can sort things out a little more clearly and say, I can only do one thing at a time. And if I start thinking about 10 things at one time, then my stress level rises. So anyway, I find it helpful. It gives me some perspective.
Thank you, James. Thank you for coming back tonight and finishing the story.
Yeah, I'm sure the story continues on. You know, this is an infinite series. This thing called life.
And I want to actually publicly thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in and do this thing and just, well, I'm not sure if you turned me loose or threw me in the deep end of the pool, but
maybe both. You know?
A little of both. But it is the very best way that I learn, and this is just the opportunity of the lifetime for me. And I really appreciate that you've been so supportive during this time. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're doing a phenomenal job. So thank you for taking this on and, you know, moving, you know, mid-week service and making it a wow.
I have to mention that when we were talking about naming it WOW, somebody says, but it's not. And I said, yeah, but it will be. So as we move towards the offering, I forgot to do the announcements. I know. I'm just going to go on my permanent record. So the chaplains are going to have their healing circle next door, as they always do on Wednesday. On Sunday, May 27th, Reverend Stu Bittman from South Tahoe's Unity at the Lake is going to be here. He will offer a Sunday talk accompanied by a heart-centered meditation by Sherry Rain, our leader of our chaplains. And there'll be all-out live music by Michael Rogers, and then there's an afternoon workshop titled Living from the Heart. It's about how to use heart math and other practices to help us live more deeply in heart-centered space. And registration for that workshop is open now. And those of you, if you've been through the Q process, they also talk about heart math in there. And then next week is Dances for Universal Peace. How many of you have come for that? So Christine Mance will be here again. And you know, this draws on sacred phrases, scripture and poetry of the many spiritual traditions of the earth. And we chant and dance, and it's a lovely evening. So, of course, the salad is at 6, and the service starts, or the dancing starts at 7. So we'll see you here for that next week. And James, would you like to do the offering?
Well, as we prepare for getting into this flow of oneness with the presence of God and practicing this principle of knowing that whatever we give comes back to us, enriches us, and also supports this community so that we're in a position to help others transform their lives to become the best they're here to be. Let us say our offertory blessing together. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God. I almost started singing, you know, sometimes I used to be in a church, you did a song, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I just want to thank you, God. Feels so good. Feels so good. Feels so good. I just want to thank you, God. See, we can create our own music. Everything is within us.
Let's stand and do our prayer for protection and see how connected we can get.
Yeah, we'll be good. We'll figure it out. There you go. There you go.
Okay, you break it. Okay, you break it there.
All right.
Is everybody all right?
All right, we're all connected. We're one in the spirit, we're one in the flesh.
Okay, everybody take a deep breath. Together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is